Cancorla, since this time last year, about 200,000 people have lost their jobs. Now, when somebody loses their job, they apply for a social welfare payment. It can normally take a number of weeks for the social welfare payment to be processed and paid. And if there's any complication with the claim, if the paperwork is wrong, particularly if somebody has been self-employed, it can take much longer. In some cases, 3 months, maybe more, before the social welfare payment is paid out. And while somebody who has lost their job is waiting for the social welfare payment to come to them, they are expected to go to their health centre and to make an application to their community welfare officer for supplementary welfare assistance. The problem now is that the community welfare system is creaking under the strain due to the large numbers of people who are turning up, and also indeed due to, I think, the impact of the government recruitment embargo and replacement embargo. Let me give you a couple of examples, Taoiseach. The community welfare officer at the Loughlinstown Health Centre, my constituency, been out sick for the last 4 weeks or thereabouts, was replaced, and the replacement is now out sick. There's no community welfare officer there for the last several weeks. Community welfare officer in the Dún Laoghaire Health Centre, out sick for the last 3 or 4 weeks. No community welfare officer there either. I've heard of a number of others where community welfare officers are on holidays, and that's perfectly understandable. Now, the difficulty is this, that there are people who are turning up to these centres and there's nobody there to deal with their claim. I met a man who's been out of work since the 11th of May, has got no payment of any kind from social welfare or from the community welfare officer. He told me that but for the Vincent de Paul, he would have starved. I met somebody else who lost their job in January of last year, who has a mortgage, is under pressure from the financial institution to repay the mortgage in arrears, would be entitled to mortgage interest relief, but can't get a community welfare officer to make a decision on it. Another woman, self-employed, has been 3 weeks trying to get a community welfare officer to address the requirement that she had. I got a report that this day last week, people queued for 2.5 hours at the Loughlinstown Health Centre to meet a community welfare officer, to be eventually told that nobody was showing up to deal with their problems. Now, I don't place the blame for this on the community welfare officers. I know them. There are people who have done a fine job and are doing a fine job in very difficult circumstances. But there are 2 problems here that are going to have to be addressed urgently, Taoiseach, by somebody. First of all, many of the people who are now turning up at social welfare offices and at community welfare offices have never had any contact with the social welfare system and never wanted to have contact with the social welfare system. And it's a pretty grim experience for them to find themselves out of work, their social welfare payment not coming through, and the emergency payment, the emergency service that's supposed to apply, not kicking in, and nobody there to deal with their problem. And secondly, there is a problem, I suggest, with the degree of pressure and stress that is now on the community welfare service as a result of the large numbers that are attending, and as a result also of the complicated circumstances in which people are presenting, people coming out of self-employment and so on, and with varying types of social welfare records. So my question to you this morning, Taoiseach, is what is the government going to do to ensure that when somebody who's already in a bad enough situation, having lost their job, that they're going to get the service that they're entitled to when they turn up at a social welfare office or a community welfare office? And secondly, will there be sufficient staff drafted into this area to ensure that an adequate service is provided to the increasing demand? This is a service that was operating for about 150,000 people unemployed. There's now 400,000 people unemployed, and it needs to be adjusted in order to meet the new demand. Well, Cancorla, my purpose in raising this is to get it solved, because my concern here is with the people who have lost their jobs, stressful situation for them in any event, huge change in their living circumstances, and who suddenly find themselves in a situation that they have to turn to the social welfare services for assistance. And that's bad enough, but to turn to the social welfare services for assistance and that assistance not to be available, or the door to be, people literally to turn up and to find a notice on the window saying there's going to be nobody here this week, that's just not acceptable. And if it's happening like that in the constituency of the Minister for Social and Family Affairs that I have the honour of sharing with her, then I suspect it's happening, and I know from colleagues that it's happening elsewhere as well. What I want to see happening is I want to see it resolved. I want to see a situation that where somebody has to turn to the social welfare services, that their claim is dealt with promptly, that there's somebody there to meet with them, that the services are organised in such a way and delivered in such a way that is happening. I might draw your attention as well, Taoiseach, to the consequences, apart from the consequences for the individual, which is my primary concern. There are also knock-on consequences. My colleague Deputy Michael D. Higgins, for example, drew attention recently to the consequences of these delays for people being offered short-term work. People who are now being offered, people who find themselves unemployed, if they're offered short-term work for a week or 2 weeks, their difficulty is that if they take up that offer of short-term work, they go back into the back of the queue again when they apply for social welfare. So somebody who has had the experience of having to wait 3 months for their claim to come through, and then have had this kind of experience that I've just described to you at the community welfare officer, somebody offers them a job for a week or two, they will wonder what's going to happen next time round when they come out of that job and apply for it. So apart from the need to do this in the interests of people who are unemployed, and I would suggest also in the interests of the existing cohort of community welfare officers who are under strain. This is a very stressful port at the moment to be dealing with the amount of claims that are coming through. It's also acting as a disincentive for people to take up short-term work. So I would ask that the matter be dealt with promptly, and it is something that I'll return to again if it's not.